Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank Mr. Yoho and also Mr. Sherman, Mr. Deutsch, for letting me participate today and making a statement. I wanted to ask Ambassador Wells a few questions, and Ambassador, thank you for your service and for your time this morning. I want to talk about Afghanistan, because we are 16 years into the war there. After all that time, this conflict obviously remains one of our most important foreign policy priorities, and there's an enormous amount at stake, obviously, for our country, for Afghanistan, and for the region. In August, President Trump announced his South Asia strategy at Fort Myer, Virginia. He told the world that we will win and that we will defeat them and defeat them handily. It was a lot of tough talk, but it really left me with more questions than answers, because we don't know the details. We don't know how this plan will bring the conflict to an end, and I want to just talk about that. You know, I voted for all the AUMFs back in 2001, 2002, and I'm really very much chagrined that we're still operating on that. We should have this Congress attack foreign policy and do what's right, rather than relying on a Congress when I was here, but I would venture to say 80 to 90% of the members still here or were not here back then. So I have some questions. Madam Ambassador, is the administration's position that the war in Afghanistan will come to an end by a military victory won on the battlefield?
No, victory is a sustainable political settlement that results in a stable Afghanistan whose territory is not used to threaten the United States and our partners. Sir, I had the opportunity to accompany the Secretary on his trip to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, and there I was able to see, you know, the impact of the strategy in each of those countries. For Afghanistan, it is a recommitment to that country, the knowledge that we're prepared to stay with them as they have to undertake what are very difficult and necessary reforms. It's telling the Pakistanis that we're not leaving, it's not 1989, that you need to count on our presence, and instead of hedging, you know, identify how to mediate the legitimate interests that you have in Afghanistan at a negotiating table. And in India, it's recognizing the role, positive role, that India can play in Afghanistan's economic stabilization. And so I found across, you know, the region, the strategy was extraordinarily resonant. And I do believe that after 4 years of counting us out, we have changed the dynamic and we've changed the conversation, and we're going to see progress as a result.
So thank you. Let me ask you this. Has the administration provided American troops in Afghanistan additional authorities beyond the train, advise, and equip mission, essentially putting them back into more of a combat role?
The mission is still a train, advise, and equip. I think both Secretary Mattis and the President have made mention to authorities being provided that will allow for more aggressive targeting. That's not really my area of expertise, so I did defer to my defense colleagues. But the number of troops, the commitment of our troops, and the ability of our troops to, you know, actively and aggressively assist the Afghan forces will make a difference.
Well, Secretary Tillerson said this is a war that will come to an end through a negotiated settlement. He said, we will not win, but the Taliban won't win either. If that's true, why are we then sending more troops to Afghanistan?
As Secretary Mattis testified, and I believe General Nicholson, the conflict had been a stalemate, you know, generally in favor of the government, but a stalemate. And it had not, the Taliban have not yet been convinced that they're not going to win on the battlefield. And so the provision of additional forces to enhance the train, advise, and assist, and to push it down to a lower level, we believe is going to be quite significant in making a difference on the battlefield, along with the additional air assets that are being provided. And so, as I said at the outset, the key impediment to achieving a peaceful negotiated settlement is the unwillingness to date of the Taliban to engage directly with the government of Afghanistan. We have to change that calculus of the Taliban using both military and political means.
You mentioned earlier that the administration believes the war will come to an end through a negotiation. So let me ask you, what is the administration doing to prepare for this negotiation, and why aren't we more focused on touting a potential peace process?
We remain very active in all of the regional architectures that have existed and have been developed to reinforce a message of, that supports a negotiated political solution. I just recently hosted a quadrilateral meeting with the Chinese, the Afghans, and the Pakistanis. I look forward to participating in the Heart of Asia conference that's coming up, the Kabul process. There's an international contact group. There are a variety of diplomatic initiatives that continue to work very closely. But fundamentally, we need to get the parties to agree to talk to one another directly, and that involves changing the Taliban's calculus. We also believe, I also believe that we need to improve the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan to see better cooperation between the two countries. And so we've been supportive of General Bajwa, Chief of Army Staff's recent visit to Kabul, his commitment to undertake specific initiatives with his Afghan counterparts. So at a variety of levels, bilaterally, trilaterally, and in larger international groupings, we are pursuing this effort, sir.
I don't believe that we should cut and run in Afghanistan. I don't believe that we shouldn't care about what happens there. Obviously, it's very important, but I think you can understand that many of us are worried about getting bogged down in a situation where we can't get out, and use it more and more as justification. And as the years go on, and we're still going back to an AUMF that's old and antiquated. And by the way, I said this under the previous administration, not only under this administration, I would say it under any administration. I do think Congress has to play a much more important role. We are a co-equal branch of government, and we should be playing a more important role if indeed the effect of our policy is going to be to wear us down and keep us there in a war that we cannot win, that admittedly we cannot win. You know, what changes? What changes 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now?
And I think the steps that the government of Afghanistan is taking and needs to take to enhance its inclusivity, to make itself a more attractive partner, to demonstrate that the central government is representative of all the Afghan people is critical. And so, you know, both President Ghani and Dr. Abdullah, when they met with Secretary Tillerson, discussed the Kabul Compact, the 200 metrics that the Afghans themselves have developed to be able to measure specific reforms across the fields of economics, governance, security, and reconciliation are an important symbol of the fact that with President Ghani and Dr. Abdullah, we do have partners that we can work with in this effort at reform.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. We're honored by your presence, and thank you for the questions. And I would